the graph published the roadmap in February, and at a high level, it represents the protocol, products, and economics of the graph ecosystem for 2026. And this call is meant to go through those in more detail. I'll put the agenda on the screen for us. So we'll be kicking things off with some strategic context. This is an overview of where things sort of stand now, where we're headed at a high level. We'll go through Horizon overview and the product suite, followed by a roadmap walkthrough. After that, Edge and Node will be presenting about AMP, and then we'll close out with a question and answer session. So without further ado, Nick, team lead at the foundation, will kick us off with strategic context.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thank you everybody for joining. Some additional context about this call today is we've heard a lot from the community, whether it be on the forum or on Twitter, that they want a return of these quarterly update calls. That was something that the Graph did historically. So I'm really thrilled to be part of the team and welcome so many of our contributors here today to relaunch these calls and provide important updates that the community and the ecosystem has requested. And I want to thank everybody that's joined today's call and supported it happening. So thank you everybody for taking time. It's great to see so many familiar faces. I have a couple of remarks today to set up some context that I think would be important to share from the foundation's perspective. So the first topic I wanted to discuss today is about the foundation mandate. So I always take the opportunity when I get a chance like this just to shout out all of my colleagues at the Graph Foundation, but I want to, double click on the fact that this foundation team is fully locked in on our mandate, fully committed. And there's been, since the transition of leadership at the foundation early last year, there's been a lot of points over the last 13 months or so where the foundation used that mandate to steward the health and growth of the Graph protocol and ecosystem as a North Star. And I think back on the last 13 months and think about many inflection points where we could have, acted selfishly or done something sort of contrary to the mandate. But I'm so proud to be part of a team that always did the right thing and sort of dug in on their mandate. And so a lot of the foundation team members are here today. I want to publicly say thank you to all of you and recognize the great work that we're doing as we continue as a foundation team to put the interests of the protocol and the ecosystem first. And a lot of what we're going to talk today reflects that intent and our commitment to that. Something else I want to talk about as well on a different topic is just protocol maturation. So I think one thing that's become clear to anybody who's been contributing and participating within the Graph ecosystem is that the industry around the Graph has continued to evolve and change since the protocol launched. And the product and sort of the vision of what the Graph can be and will be has also needed to mature. And so a lot of the thinking shared in the recent technical roadmap and a lot of the thinking that will be shared today reflects agility and flexibility of a protocol that finds itself in a industry that continues to change and evolve based on user demand, based on the regulatory environment, and based on a whole bunch of other macro factors that one cannot control, as well as a product vision for how the Graph can provide value to users throughout the world based on its mission and vision as well. And so I think when there was a leadership change at the foundation and we really took a hard look at what had changed since launch and what we needed to sort of implement and just increase our flexibility towards. And one important point I just want to click on multiple times today is that the foundation team remains very agile on delivering our mandate, but holding tightly to how the value, how the protocol itself can evolve to create value for users throughout the world. And again, we are steadfast and set on doing that. Another topic I wanted to quickly touch on is some changes that I think people will notice at the foundation level and throughout the ecosystem. So one of the things that we noticed when we started looking at the evolution of the industry and the way in which the protocol needed to grow and expand is that this multi-core dev model that was sort of the basis of what the Graph has been for so long probably needed to be reevaluated. And that model, I would argue, in other ecosystems and other protocols has faced a lot of headwind over the years. And so to put it very succinctly, the foundation has changed course on its a thesis related to working with core devs and contributors. And we don't currently plan to perpetuate that multi-core dev model into the future. We think there's better ways to work with and partner with contributors that want to build on the graph and contribute tools and resources to the protocol. So one of the first things you'll see in 2026 and beyond is the departure of a multi-core dev model and something more specific. And that'll also be reflected in the grants program. So in the past, I think the graph has had a situation where it had a very robust community grants program working with a lot of different grantees. And there were times, I think, where the community's like, oh, that grant makes a lot of sense, but what about this one over here? And I think early on, when you're launching a protocol and you're building an ecosystem, you probably want to fund as many things as you possibly can and see what gets some support and growth. We've reached a stage in the maturation of the protocol and the treasury thesis, or managing the treasury, that we want to be much more specific and much more focused on the types of grants. This is nothing new. The foundation years ago made a assertion in its annual report that it would continue to refine and focus its grant funding, but we're going to continually refine that as well in 2026 and beyond. So a lot of that grant funding will be a lot more focused. I guess the last thing would be this increased desire to do more market focused product creation. So I think a lot of organizations, whether they're within this industry or outside of this industry, when they build and think about product, sometimes they have this "if you build it, they will come" mentality, meaning you just kind of build what all the workers within the vacuum or all the builders within the vacuum want without really knowing what the market demands. But I think because of a impactful R&D retreat that occurred last year in Chicago with a lot of the core dev teams and a lot of the builders and contributors within the ecosystem, a lot of great ideas came out of that. Two of which were, number one, let's build things outside of the vacuum. Let's take a market first focus and look at how we iterate the protocol and the value it creates by looking at consumer demand patterns and make sure we can meet those. And the second thing was, for the longest time, a product thesis inside the graph always had to start on the network. So it was one of these dependencies of like, hey, how are we ever going to find out if we have product market fit or if there's demand for this particular offering, if we're always making the launch of such a thing contingent on being on the network? And so in Chicago during this R&D retreat, another decision that was made is like, hey, sometimes these things have to start hosted and not on the network to prove market validity and demand, user demand. And then you kind of pick up the hard work and task of putting it on the network. And so I think people within the ecosystem have probably recently seen some product ideas launch sort of in a hosted wrapper before it goes to the network to see if there's product market demand. And these beta launches have allowed iteration on product and retooling to make sure that it is sort of, once it reaches the network, it's fully evolved and ready to go. So those were two decisions that came out of Chicago that I think, again, will be a priority for the foundation and the way we organize and work with builders within the ecosystem. I think the final point I'll make here before I welcome on two of our colleagues at the foundation is what Horizen did for us. So for anybody that's been tracking the ecosystem and the graph's growth, you know that late last year, the Horizen upgrade was launched. My colleague BK is going to talk more about this, but I want to say that was a major inflection point for the graph. It took graph protocol V1 and sort of created a V2. And so before I hand it off, what I want to do is just say a lot of people spent a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears on the creation and research behind Horizen. Some of them are on the call today and some of them are not. But as a foundation team, we want to recognize the tremendous amount of work that went into Horizen. A lot of learnings, a lot of hard lessons, and a lot of vision for what the graph can actually be in the world are baked into Horizen. And there were, of course, some foundation colleagues that worked hand in hand with core contributors and others to make Horizon's implementation and adoption a huge success. So shout out to my foundation colleagues that were able to do that. Shout out to our indexer community that adopted Horizon and welcomed it into what they were doing. And of course, all of the OGs within the graph that sourced this Horizon idea so many years ago and brought it to vision. So with that, thank you everybody for joining today's call. Thrilled to share this information with you today and very excited about the future of the graph. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Nick. We're going to get right into Horizon, and BK is the product marketing lead at the foundation. He's going to take us through that and then into the product suite.
Hi, everybody. I'm BK, lead product marketing, and this section is really to provide a high-level overview of the Graph's technical roadmap across protocol, products, and economic layer. So in the next slide, since its launch, the Graph has focused on its core first iteration that is around a subgraph-centric network. Subgraphs established a core standard for indexing blockchain data, and onboarding it helped onboard tens of thousands of developers that support applications like Uniswap, QuickSwap, Lido, and many others. Now, the protocol has primarily driven adoption by incentivizing indexers to serve subgraphs, and the core aim there was really to prove out the viability of a decentralized data infrastructure with subgraphs as that core product. This, of course, has introduced a number of trade-offs. And while working towards decentralizing the subgraph network, the Graph's protocol development really concentrated on one core vertical, that is custom APIs. And those work really well for small to medium-sized developers, but don't fully address the range of emerging needs that we're seeing in the blockchain data market, particularly around enterprise or institutions. And so as a result, there's really three key limitations with the first iteration of the protocol. The first is limited use case coverage. It does not fully serve high performance, real-time, or enterprise-grade workloads. The second is around narrow distribution. Access has been really concentrated with a small set of interfaces, limiting broader market reach and distribution. And the third is a constrained growth model. So the protocol has relied on a single data service and a limited payment pathway. So that really creates a bottleneck in terms of how we can potentially expand. So overall, subgraphs validated the model that we were looking to build out, but it doesn't fully address the diversity of needs within the market. And so in the next slide, what we've done is we've iterated into version 2 of the Graph protocol, which we called Graph Horizon. That introduces a modular platform for multiple data services, and this shifts the focus away from individual developers to enabling providers, chains, and enterprises to drive long-term ecosystem growth. Data services on the Graph are built of 5 core principles, starting with permissionless participation. Anyone can integrate as a data provider, and that ensures that they can have open access, competition, and long-term continuity at the protocol level. There are 4 additional principles following from that. The first is around economic security. That means that the integrating in the protocol requires staking mechanisms that align incentives and secure data services. The second is around trust and minimized payments. This means systems like GraphTally or TAP enable efficient micropayments between service or payment gateways and data providers. Quality assurance, which are enabled through arbitration mechanisms that enforce service reliability and performance. And the last is around governance. Governance kind of dictates all these 4 other principles, and it can be specific or it has specific parameters for each of the data services that will be introduced, including things like issuance, arbitration, and security mechanisms or security requirements. So together, these principles ultimately kind of set the foundation for what is a scalable multi-service protocol of the Graph. In the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about the product suite. And in this next slide, I'll kind of do an overview of these 6 core products. Initially, these are kind of the curated product suite that we're intending or proposing to move forward with throughout the course of this year. Rather than reviewing each of these in great detail, I'm going to try to frame them kind of 3 at a time around developer products and enterprise products. So in the next slide, you'll see here, these are the developer products. For developers entering Web3, the path is relatively standardized at this point. After learning blockchain fundamentals and selecting a chain, most applications rely on kind of 3 core components. First is around read and write access, and this means that using JSON RPC can help read and write through a chain and ultimately enables Web3 wallets. The second is around front-end data or a user interface. And users are going to need data that is basically access to balances, transactions, prices, and account data for power for those user interfaces. And this is currently solved by the Graphs Token API offering. The last is around smart contracts. Basically, a developer is going to deploy an application logic in their backend, or sorry, in their smart contract, and then in order to be able to get data from that, they typically use a custom API like Subgraphs. This works really well, again, for small to mid-sized developers, and it ultimately lets them index that smart contract data and get it into their front end. And we're historically very good at serving this particular use case. So these components represent the baseline stack for getting started as a developer, and they're well-established industry standards at this point. But the broader product suite really expands beyond that foundation, mainly for advanced or enterprise-grade use cases. So in the next slide, we can see kind of a visual of what this looks like. As enterprises have entered the space, we've seen that they really need certain specific problems solved. And those really revolve around performance and latency, cost and compliance, and access to liquidity. And below, you see 3 products that we have in our suite. It's worth noting that these products don't map on kind of like performance and latency is not specific to substreams. These 3 principles kind of expand and apply to all 3 of the products that I'll be talking about. So the first of these products is Substreams. This is a high-performance streaming solution for real-time and historical data. It's really used for low-latency applications or use cases in large-scale analytics, particularly for getting historical data. Similarly, AMP offers streaming capabilities to solve similar real-time and historical data needs for enterprises, but it's also a blockchain-native database designed for compliance, auditability, and advanced analytics. So it's really tailored to the needs that we're seeing emerging with these large institutions, such as banks, custodians, and the like that are entering the space. And then lastly, we have Tycho. This is a product built on Substream, so that kind of points to Substream's composability. But Tycho is specifically for liquidity and routing data service. It helps solvers identify liquidity and optimize trade executions. The best way to kind of think about this is if you go to an application like CowSwap, you'll be able to make a transfer or a swap of USDC to GRT. And Tycho works behind the scenes to help solvers optimize how those routes happen and how trades are enabled. So we're really glad to have that product being introduced to our product suite. Together, overall, these products extend beyond the baseline developer and really are about solving specific high-performance, data-intensive, and enterprise-grade use cases. So one last party note before I hand it over to my colleague Orion is that we just wanted to kind of preemptively address any concerns about this roadmap being too ambitious or fragmented. While these products, my hope is that kind of framing these in the sense of developer and enterprise solutions, and that provides a more cohesive kind of core focus that we're looking to execute on. It's also worth noting that the Graph Foundation is kind of focusing on enabling protocol growth, but not necessarily building out each and every product or funding every initiative. And that speaks to the point that Nick made earlier around core devs and that core dev model. The protocol serves as a mechanism to integrate these data services and does not rely on the foundation kind of building every aspect of that. So our goal is to kind of enable that protocol growth in that way. These priorities come with trade-offs, of course. Not all the products in the current suite will be the focus of data service integrations initially. Instead, we have this kind of pragmatic approach to decentralization, which requires data services to find product market fit before we pour more resources into that protocol integration. So ultimately, we intend to use the continued data and feedback to refine this approach, and hopefully these services will gain traction in the way that we currently think they do, and we'll see growth happen in that way. And with that, I'll hand it back over to, I believe, Elizabeth.
Thanks, BK. Just a reminder, as I see people coming in, that we're recording this call and it will be available for review later. And I also see that some questions are coming in the chat, so that's awesome. We'll get a chance to address those at the very end. So next up is Orion. He's going to take us through the roadmap itself. He is data service and infra lead at the foundation.
Hi, and thank you to everyone that is joining the call today. I will be providing some more color to the roadmap overview that BK just gave by mapping it onto a timeline and focus areas. So if we can start with the first slide. This is the developer focused products. For the JSON RPC, we are bringing a reliable and decentralized JSON RPC service to the Graph network. which allows consumers to perform both RPC reads and writes through indexes. On the token API, we have focused on improving performance, and throughout the year, we will expand coverage across chains and protocols. On the subgraph side, our main focus this year is to improve capital efficiency and incentive alignment and ensure that rewards go to indexes that are providing real value on the network. And we are in final testing before going live with the X402 integration. And we're also exploring direct indexer payments to improve coordination and responsiveness. This is something that will go live already the upcoming quarter, and we expect to continue to ramp up our DIPS initiative throughout the year and Q3 and Q4. So next slide, please. On the enterprise side, we've seen a strong adoption of substreams, and the focus is now on integrating it into the protocol and rolling it out in stages to the decentralized network. AMP provides a high-performance, verifiable data that is finding product market fit for compliance and analytics-heavy use cases. And we are currently running pilot studies with a goal of launching the data service on the network by the end of the year. And you'll hear a bit more of AMP by the end of this call. So yeah. On Tycho, Tycho focuses on liquidity and routing data for solvers and trading applications. And we are planning a pilot already in this upcoming quarter, followed by a full data service launch by the end of the year. Next slide. On chain integrations, previously chain integrations were handled mostly by core devs in the ecosystem. We are shifting more to a network-first model where chains can be supported directly by indexes on the decentralized network. That is also enabled by the direct indexer payments that I mentioned on a previous slide. We are launching a liquid staking initiative that enables one-click delegation, making it accessible to exchanges and asset managers, as well as delegators that want to have abstracted away the complexity of choosing indexes and services to delegate to. We will also, throughout the year, integrate it into DeFi with liquid swaps and lending protocols and cross-chain delegation. And this initiatives increase both the capital efficiency in the network and structural demand. We will also launch a GIP where we will outline how issuance can be handled across multiple services. And so we can continue to use issuance to support growth and align incentives. And if you have any question on the more specifics on the roadmap and the technical implementations, feel free to post it in the chat, and we'll get to it at the end of this call. So that's what I have, and thank you all. And I'll hand it back to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Arian. So for the AMP section, we're going to invite Ford, who is the Director of Engineering at EdgeNode. And I understand that there's maybe a demo as well, so looking forward to that.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth. You can hear me, right? Awesome. Okay, so I realize maybe some people on this call are not familiar with AMP. It's something we've been putting more public pretty recently, so we made this source available in November at DevConnect. And we've been heads down working on this, working with some initial partners and developing this blockchain-specific database. So what is AMP? Most data stacks were built before blockchains, so they can ingest chain data. They can do everything a database can do, but they're not really native to blockchain data. So most teams end up naturally building a bunch of bespoke plumbing and setting up their off-the-shelf databases to work with blockchain data. So they often lose the cryptographic context and lineage of that data. and they have to move blockchain-specific optimizations and logic to the edges of the system instead of integrating them deeply into them. So this disconnect is also why we've traditionally built bespoke indexing pipelines and leverage code-driven indexing workloads for different blockchain networks. And so we decided to go back to the drawing board and build AMP, which is a purpose-built blockchain database and streaming engine. It understands blocks, transactions, and logs natively. It understands that blockchain data is in motion and can be affected by train reorgs. You can query AMP directly with SQL without writing any mapping or transformation code. And the declarative SQL language is very powerful. It allows users to specify what they want, and AMP will continue to optimize under the hood how that data is delivered. AMP is built on a modern open data stack. We have columnar storage and in-memory formats with Parquet and Arrow. We have fast, extensible query engine with the open source Data Fusion engine, and an efficient wire protocol with Flight. These tools give us an amazing base to build on, where we can really focus on optimizing on specific blockchain features on top of that. You can see also I noted here that you can connect blockchain data to many places already. So we have 10 plus connectors and that ecosystem is growing. All right, so now that I've kind of like laid the groundwork of what is AMP, we'd like to give a demo. So hopefully the demo gods are nice to us. Daniel's got a demo ready to go here. Daniel, are you ready to share your screen?
Yep. So today I'll be demoing one of the applications of AMP, and we thought that kind of with the agentic era that we're in now, that showing how AMP can sort of contribute to that growing ecosystem would be, a good showcase of AMP, right? A lot of people are building lots of different things, especially with the rise of OpenClaw, Cloud Code, all these different agentic tools that are kind of coming out. And the way AMP has been built, because it's built kind of at the ground floor, it can be integrated into these agentic systems quite easily through the use of MCPs, to the use of functional tool calling. And that's kind of what I wanted to demo today. So today it would be a demo of working with a few of the data sets that we have here at AMP, built into AMP, just to kind of walk through a very simple use case that can kind of relate to everyone, right? So what you're looking at here is just basically a chatbot that's built into the upcoming AMP platform that allows you to have a conversation with your data, right? And so the goal for this is that it will work with any data set that's on AMP. It works across multiple chains. We don't really even need to do composition, because the AI can query a chain from Base or a chain from Ethereum and do the comparison there. And basically the same way that people use Claude or ChatGPT, they can sort of have similar conversations directly about the blockchain data that they have access to. So that's public data like Compound, Aave, Uniswap, and things like that, or it could be with their own private data sets that aren't public as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive into the demo, and I have the demo script here, so I won't be typing, so you don't have to watch that. I'll just be pasting. So we want to learn more about lending. So we want to ask, what are the lending protocols available on AMP right now? As you can see, it kind of has a discovery phase where you can ask it a question and it will go through and look at all the data sets available to it. Now, again, this is kind of in our test data, so it's not searching all public available data sets that are being built. But for what we have for this current environment, it kind of spits out all of the different lending protocols that are currently available on AMP that we can explore. Right, so you see Aave, Compound, MakerDAO, and then the two Radiants on the different chains, right? So now it's asking if we want to explore any one of them. And then for the purposes of this demo, let's do Compound. And stablecoins are a really big thing as well that are that's kind of been pushing on the crypto front. And so for the purposes of this demo, I just want to know what assets are being borrowed the most, and I'm particularly focused on stablecoin activity. So as you can see, I'll walk through once it's done actually what's happening in the back end. But you can see that, one second, once it's done. Cool. You can see what's happening here because the steps collapse is it found the compound data set, which was here, that we said we wanted to ask a question about. It pulled down the entire table structure. And so these are all of the different tables that are within the data sets. And then, sorry. And then move to actually writing the query. So you can actually take this query and run it against AMP, and it will give you the data as is. And then you see the actual data that's been fetched. And then we have a visualization agent that's built into the specific chat that determines based on the data that has been returned what visualization to show. And so it shows a bar chart as the proper visualization, and then displayed the bar chart with the proper token symbols and everything else built in. So we have some token symbol resolution and a few other things that are built specifically for this this chat interface, so that it's a lot more readable to the user. So you can see here it talks about all of the different stable coins on Compound and says that it's largely dominated by DAI. And so I just wanted to give one demo. It does this for every single sort of question that involves fetching data from AMP. And you can always, if anyone uses this at any point, click through the steps and kind of actually see it happening as we go. So continuing on with the demo, I want to know the top 10 borrowers by share of total volume. So to do that, it will go through that same process of writing the query. It's already fetched all the tables, so it doesn't need to redo that. So it's just focusing on taking those same tables from the previous conversation, writing the query, as you can see here, showing a preview of the data, the first 10 rows, and then it goes through and then synthesizes that information and then responds to the user, right? Saying that biggest borrower is this user for about 6.5%, and then breaks it all down into this really nice pie chart here that you can see all the top 10 borrowers by percentage represented in this chart. And then want to follow up with another question that says like, well, that's great, but we want to see how borrowing has evolved and trended over time. So you ask that question as a follow-up. Again, we're still in the context of Compound, so it doesn't need to refetch the data set again. It already knows that we're referring to Compound, and then it goes through and does that again, right? So now you can see the borrowing activity over time, and then of course it goes through and gives you a good explanation of what's going on. Again, we're in staging, which is why the data is not fully up to date, but it still kind of demonstrates the purpose of what it's attempting to do based on how much data has been indexed. And then after that, I want to see the most recent borrower transactions. So I'll do that. Then it's kind of going through that same process as we all know now, just writing the query, fetching the rows of data, and then picking the proper visualization for this. So here you can see the most recent transactions on chain. And then for this specifically, it just went through and picked a table because it's showing like a bunch of information about the borrower, which token was being borrowed, and the transactions that were happening directly on Compound. And then we want to then learn more about deposits. And so you can ask, what are people depositing into the protocol on Compound? Here you can see again, it goes through and actually provides information about the nuances of collateral, because you have supply deposit events and then you have raw token units. and then it's like asking another follow-up question. So I feel like I've been talking for a while now, so I'll stop here. But as you can see, we've integrated AMP into a experience that aligns with the agentic era and where agents are going. Building an experience that is relatable, building an experience that people can have conversations about blockchain data. And if I probably didn't mention anything about this coming from blockchain or the question being so focused on a blockchain native protocol like Compound, a user can probably come in here and have a conversation about their data and just assume it's coming from a database. So another thing that is super cool about AMP is just the speed of the queries. As you can see, as I was going through the conversation, the speed in which it was able to query the database for information, return data, and then on top of it, the latency of the AI agent here to take that information, understand it, and then provide a response is also super snappy. I'm pretty sure every single question was about 2 to 3 seconds from start to end. So that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Daniel. I don't think, yeah, we can go to QA at the end if anyone has questions on the demo. Yeah, thanks again, Daniel. I think that is like a great example of how powerful both the breadth and depth you get with this SQL databases. So you can explore the tables available, the protocols that are there, and then pretty quickly go into decoding the data, getting time series, getting aggregations, and do both. And agents love having access to both those layers of data. Okay, so a blockchain-specific database is cool, but how does that affect the network and the Graph protocol, right? So if we're going to make amazing products on the network really should be a part of the product instead of just being a means of distribution. The network provides a natural governance and incentive layer that lends itself really well to building things like a data catalog and a data lake of blockchain data once we have this blockchain-specific database. And ultimately, we could go even further than a data lake and build a diverse data mesh of public data. So with the new AMP data service on the network, we will leverage direct indexer payments, commonly referred to as DIPs in the community, to provide direct incentive to sync and serve specific data sets that are valuable. The direct indexer payments will also give the gateway teams a lever to directly affect user experience. And we really want to prioritize the end user experience here. The data lake can be a backbone for many downstream products, not just a product in itself. So providing verifiable raw data sets for all active blockchain networks is valuable in its own right, but it's a great base to build things on top of. The data lake will also be, as we just showed, a rich, valuable source of information for agents. The power and flexibility of SQL, and then also layering in native agent communication protocols will make the data lake easy to interact with for agents. So we can add in like X402 support, MCP servers, A2A support, and leverage our expertise as we've been working on agent systems around the edges to integrate that directly into the data lake. And on the next slide here, we can kind of envision a future once we have a data lake, what that can enable. So what can we build on top of a data lake if we did stabilize that? This is where it gets even more exciting. The data lake, as I said, is a foundation, but it can also be a vibrant ecosystem can come out of it. So the future may include things like features for enriching data, going beyond just the raw blockchain data and adding context and intelligence, adding labels to data, adding supporting off-chain data, linking in analysis results, and ultimately enabling a multiplayer data forensic ecosystem where people can support each other and add data and continue to build off of each other. We can add governance features that let individuals own their data products and also let communities own their data products and steward those data products forward as a community. We're doing some research and talking about a bounty network that can close the loop on the economics of data creation. If there's data that someone needs, they can request it, and the network will reward whoever delivers it. This could be a really good honeypot for agents to do valuable work on the network. And we're also researching and exploring the concept of a fat client, or you could think of it as a diverse network model, where we extend the AMP database and client itself to allow it to query across heterogeneous sources. So you can query your local SQL database, your local CSV files, your Excel files, as well as the network hosted data to have a unified view across your private local data and all public data, and run intelligence directly on that. So these features are still heavily in research and development, but this is just a taste of our forward vision for what the AMP network data lake can enable. And we're really excited to keep researching this and build it with the community. Thanks. That's all I have today.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot to EdgeNode for coming out, and for Daniel and Ford for your presentation and for sharing the demo. I know everyone's super excited about AMP, so it's exciting to get more details. So we've made it to the question and answer period at this point. The foundation team will be using the questions they've collected. I see there's still more coming in the chat, so that's awesome. The session is still being recorded, just so you know. And Nick and BK are going to take lead on answering the questions, so I'll hand it over to you, Nick, as soon as you're ready.
Well, first of all, this might be the first, community call in the history of this entire industry that's running on time. We hope to have 15 minutes for Q&A, and we're going to have exactly 15. So shout out to all the presenters, and thank you again to EdgeNode. I also want to recognize that we have other core contributors that have been OGs within the Graph community for a long, long time. So great to see GraphOps, PinX, Streaming Fast. I don't want to miss anybody here. And of course, I'm seeing some indexers here. So I'm just kind of perusing the screen here, but great to see so many folks that have been around and contributing for so long. I am now going to, Vince, nice to see you, friend. Now, I'm going to quarterback these questions. I probably won't have the answer to any of these myself, but take the opportunity now to answer some questions. We've been collating these on a different page, so I'll look at my other screen. Real quickly, I'll probably just fire one off about enterprise, and maybe I'll just throw this back to the EdgeNode team. I know Pablo's here with us today, other members of the EdgeNode team, Rodrigo, but there's a question about enterprise and how some of these product visions that we've discussed today at the Graph can compete at the enterprise level with competitive or centralized type services. So starting there, throw it, maybe Pablo, Rodrigo, do one of you want to take this?
Hey, yeah, maybe I can talk a bit on a more general point there. That is, I think decentralized services can more than compete on the enterprise front with centralized ones, especially because the way we're thinking about services on the network now is different from what I think was the original vision, where someone using the network would have to execute transactions to do something like deploy a subgraph or do like curate on a subgraph, and all of these things that were a bit clumsy UX, I guess, seen from 2026. And now the way we're thinking about the network with Horizon and with DIPS is there is always a gateway that is an entity that is kind of the front of business that serves users, that can provide an SLA, that can provide like enterprise level support, and that can provide a very nice UX that doesn't have any of the Web3 clumsiness. So I think with that in mind, once you have something like that and you have the power of the network as the backend, where there's indexers competing, and that gives you great cost, great reliability, and great uptime and stuff like that, you get the best of both worlds. And I think at that point it's quite straightforward that a decentralized service that works in this way would be very well suited to compete on and win in the enterprise world. Obviously, there's going to be, I think, some use cases that can't run in this kind of scenario. If there's like a heavily regulated thing where you need to know exactly who you're querying, or if you need to run on premise and stuff like that, those cases might be like a bit trickier for the network. But for everyone else, I think the answer is quite clear.
Thanks, Pablo. I'm doing my best here to quarterback some of these questions here. I'm going to go to a foundation colleague, Orion, for the next question. There's been a couple questions about sort of how some of this product vision impacts delegators and indexers. You work really closely with the indexer community, for example. There's been some surveys with them to figure out some of the things that the indexers are excited about. Plus, we've got some initiatives like the rewards eligibility oracle and things. When you think about the indexer community and some of the things that you've been working on with there, what are some of the things that you think that community is most excited about as it relates to this product roadmap and vision?
I think the two most exciting parts is the parts that makes the network a lot more efficient and a lot more incentive aligned. So one is the rewards eligibility oracle, which will require a minimum service level for indexers to be eligible for indexing rewards. And that will allow more rewards to be freed up from all of those indexers that are actually delivering a great quality of service on the network. Second one is the liquid staking program that will allow us to better coordinate and better incentivize and also bring more stability to the indexer community by directing rewards to those that are, again, providing on and off-chain value to the Graph network. Apart from that, I know that a lot of indexers are excited about the new data services that are coming, both the ones that are already is showing traction and value, and they're excited to see that value accrue on the protocol level, and as well as AMP and other data services that are coming in the future. So.
And BK, I'll throw one over to you. I'm seeing some questions coming in here. Is quantum? I mean, this is something that's kind of coming up on crypto Twitter quite a bit, and people are curious how the Graph, I guess, Foundation and some of our core contributors are thinking through this. I'll throw it over to you. It's a tough question, but yeah, how would you answer some of this?
Yeah, sure. So I'll preface to say that I'm certainly no industry expert on this topic, but I can give you the high level to address that. So last week I was actually on an extra Twitter space with a company called Tectonic that's doing post-quantum research, auditing, and wallets kind of like migration processes. So the first and foremost, the timeline, to the best of my knowledge, is around like 3 to 5 years. I've heard more around 5 years. The core like threat ultimately is about being able to access private keys in wallets. In terms of how it would impact our protocol, there are like some vulnerabilities in terms of like being able to access or undermine those keys to the contracts and things of that nature. But those are relatively minor risks. And given that time period is kind of a little bit further out, I would expect that basically there's a clear migration path for all of our contracts and things of that nature. So there's no real risk to GRT. And to that extent, it's pretty much the same risk as anybody that would be on Ethereum. So while that is on the Ethereum roadmap, my understanding that's a fairly straightforward progression. The bigger threat it would be to older blockchains, especially those that have like very stagnant or non-active wallets, such as like the Bitcoin network. Though that network has a very specific set of risks that don't apply to us as much. So I would expect that there'd be very minimal risk. But this is a really interesting topic if you want to take a deep dive. My sense is that it's probably more of a buzzword, but the reality is it's probably a very low threat in terms of the securities that need to be addressed, and there'll be a clear migration path moving forward. The one last thing I'll add on that is that I do expect that this will be kind of a thing that the Graph ecosystem can help users solve. Is my understanding is like there's going to be a number of users that will need to like upgrade or migrate to new wallets that have new post-quantum security. And we'd hope to kind of like aid the UX of that. In other words, if you move from one wallet to another wallet, we'd be able to provide that data and have coherency and really lend to a clear, better UX in terms of tracking your data, in terms of tax use cases and things of that nature. So while we don't have anybody kind of dedicated to the more cryptographic side, and we are taking this account from a kind of holistic protocol and data perspective.
I'm seeing also in the chat some questions about these private blockchains. And so Canton is sort of something that's getting a lot of spotlight right now, but there are obviously others. To this stage in the Graph's evolution, the core dev teams and a lot of the folks working on these projects have handled chain integrations. The vision for how this works into the future is something that we're prioritizing in 2026 at the foundation level. But to kind of get some input and some perspective on these private chains and how those relate to the graph. I know there's been a couple questions. I think Rodrigo's answering them in real time. I also want to invite anybody from the Streaming Fast team who's had experience on this. But how have you folks been thinking through and handling chain integrations as it relates to some of these private chains? Of course, BK on my team, if you want to answer as well. But I'll open it up to EdgeNode, Streaming Fast, BK, anybody that wants to provide an answer here to this question.
I'll jump in quick and just kind of note that that's probably one of the biggest trends that I've seen over the past 3 months in attending conferences. Are chains such as Aztec, Aleo, and Canton, all kind of basically posing this concern of like, how do you index data that is private or encrypted? In short, I think some of those chains are more complicated than others. That said, I know the EdgeNode team has already kind of worked on instrumenting Canton on AMP. So that problem is at least a kind of a proof of concept solved. That said, we're in ongoing conversations to kind of think about the entirety of the product suite. I guess it might not be intuitive if you're not using the products on an everyday basis, but when you see those core 6 products, they're integrated in different ways, and ultimately we would want to be able to support a variety of different use cases on chains like Canton, Aleo, Aztec, etc. So maybe I'll invite EdgeNode if they want to comment any further, but yeah, basically working with those teams to try to integrate those into various products.
Seeing some questions about tokenomics and impact to delegators. Ford, you posted a reference there to Horizon Docs, so appreciate that. Doing my best to cycle through some of this. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't sort of interject some questions related to AI. I mean, if you check the box on enterprise in terms of what's the graph ecosystem's thoughts and approach to enterprise and private chains and things, how could we not have a Q1 call in 2026 without talking a little bit about AI? Again, all these core contributors that are on the call today, Pinax, GraphOps, Streaming Fast, EdgeNode, I think folks would like to hear your perspective as builders in the trenches there, but maybe going around the horn, does anybody from one of those teams have a perspective or want to share? I know, EdgeNode, for example, you've been doing some stuff with the Ampersand, so maybe you've got some first insight there on AI and agentic demand.
Yeah, absolutely. Ampersand, as Nick mentioned, it's at ampersand.ai. It was a project we incubated that started really with our research into micropayments that the graph did with TAP, which was a batching system to allow for many micropayments to be ganged up and paid periodically. And so we were already researching agents and how they might pay each other, and then X402 hit last year, and so we jumped on it immediately. We got with the Coinbase team, and we actually contributed a deferred payment scheme to the X402 spec, which is now being reviewed and will likely be included very soon. So we have a direct line with the Coinbase team, which is great recognition. But the cool thing is that Ampersand, to produce the dashboards that the users see, is using AMP on the back end of it. So the on-chain data is coming from AMP. So it allowed us to like dog food internally the product we were already building, and then show a use case of how we could actually build, a functioning application utilizing AMP for its data source, but also it has relevancy in the agentic commerce space. So that's been a really exciting and rewarding project for us. But then separately, as you saw with Daniel's demo, and I mentioned, I think I answered in the chat as well, is that we envision a future that agents will likely be the biggest consumers of data on the graph and in general, and building towards this future. So AMP was built as SQL first, and so Sebastian mentioned agents are really good at writing SQL queries, and so having that capability for agents to search and find the data they need, query it, get the data you need, move on, So building up the capabilities for that future is highly important to us so that we stay relevant into the future.
Just looking at the time here, we'll have to answer some of these other questions in the forum, maybe in a forum post or in an update to the blog. But with a minute to go and to keep in the spirit of staying on time, I'll throw it back to Elizabeth. Thank you to all the Foundation colleagues that presented today, EduNote and everybody else. Great to see everybody. Back to you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks to every presenter today for putting the things together and sharing your thoughts. We definitely got more context on the roadmap, which is the goal. And thanks everyone else who joined for giving us your time and your questions. As Nick said, we'll follow up with anything that's really left unsaid. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our respective platforms. And please do consider signing up for the Graph newsletter, get updates monthly or quarterly there. Someone can share the link hopefully for that. But you can get to it just on thegraph.com. And for more technical people on Discord, we do have the Indexer office hours every Tuesday where you can do the question and answer live with Orion and other team members that are actually working directly with the Graph products. And besides that, just follow us on X for all the important updates. And that's it for today. So thank you so much for joining us, and I hope everyone takes care.